All right. So in this video segment, we're going to be talking about some tools in your poetic device toolbox. All poets, when they're writing poetry, have some tools that they use to make their poems vivid and exciting, and to help the reader imagine what the poet is talking about. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that poets use their writing tools, their device tools, to help the reader imagine what the poet wants them to imagine. So the first group that we're going to talk about, the first group of tools we're going to talk about, are the imagery tools. And they include simile, metaphor, hyperbole, and personification. Now, you've probably heard of simile and metaphor before. If you haven't, don't worry. We're going to explain what those are. And we're also going to talk about hyperbole and personification. And then in a separate video segment, we'll talk about melody. And in a third video segment, we'll talk about rhythm. Now, we're going to talk about it kind of quickly because you will have other lessons in this class on poetry that will be entirely devoted to each one of these tools. For this lesson, this video is just to give you an overview and an introduction to each one of these tools, what they are, and some examples. So we're going to start with simile first. Simile. Kind of, if you look at the word pretty quickly, it kind of almost looks like the word smile, but it's simile. That's how you say it, simile. A simile is a figure of speech comparing two things using the words like or as. That's the definition. Basically, what you need to remember is a simile is a sentence that compares two things that are very different, and it always has the word like or as in the sentence. That's how you know it's a simile. So here are some examples. The sun is round as a golden ball. The sun is round as a golden ball. The reason that this is a simile is because it has the word as, and it is comparing two unlike things. It's comparing the sun to a ball. Now, is the sun really a ball? No. It's saying that it is as round as a golden ball. In the next example, it says, the river is like a snake. See this river snaking through the forest here. The river is like a snake. They're comparing the river to a snake, and they're using the word like, and that's what makes this a simile. Anytime you see two things being compared and you see as or like, you know instantly it's a simile. So now we're going to look at the next type of imagery tool, which is metaphor. Now, metaphor is very, very similar to simile. So a metaphor is very much like a simile, but the difference between a metaphor and a simile is that a metaphor does not have the words like or as. It says something is another thing. So, for example, here it says, the sun is a golden ball. It says the sun is a golden ball. It doesn't say it is like or it's round as. It just says it is a golden ball. So that's a metaphor because we didn't use the words like or as. Another example here, the river is a snake. The river is a snake. Now, is the river really a snake? No. That's why this is a metaphor. The river is a snake. Doesn't use like or as. It's comparing the river to a snake, and it's saying the river is a snake, and that's what makes it a metaphor. Another example from my own life, my daughter might say, my little brother is a monster, because they don't often get along. If she says her brother is a monster, that's a metaphor. If she says my brother's grouchy like a monster, that's a simile. So that's the difference between metaphor and simile. They're very, very similar, but metaphor does not use like or as. Next is hyperbole, and we hear hyperbole a lot in the English language because hyperbole deals with exaggerations, like saying something is bigger or better or more than what is true. I like this definition here. Hyperbole is saying more than is true in order to make a point, an exaggeration. So here's an example. The dog's bark was so loud it could be heard from coast to coast. So the part of this sentence that makes this a hyperbole is the part in red, heard from coast to coast. Could a dog bark really so loud that it could be heard from coast to coast? Is that possible? I'm not sure that's possible. Maybe if he was on TV or on the radio, maybe then, but they're really saying, they're making a point about how loud the dog is. The dog's bark was so loud, it could be heard from coast to coast. And that's a hyperbole because that's an exaggeration of how loud the dog's bark is. Here's another one. He worked his fingers to the bone. Now that means that someone worked really, really hard. If you work your fingers to the bone, that's working really hard because you work away all the skin and the flesh of your hand down to the bone. But is it really possible to do that? Probably not. But what they're trying to say with this exaggeration is that he worked really, really hard. So that's hyperbole. Another example of hyperbole would be, he's as tall as a skyscraper. He's as tall as a skyscraper. Could someone really be as tall as a skyscraper? No. But the point is, he's really tall. And the last one that we're going to talk about in this part of the toolbox is personification. Personification gives human qualities to things that are not human. So, for example, our example here about the trees dancing says, the trees danced in the breeze. Now, can trees really dance? No. That's something that humans do, although this artist does a good job of trying to make us think that trees could dance. If you see a line like this in the poem, the trees danced in the breeze, what do you think the poet's really trying to say? What's the image that the poet is trying to get you to imagine? He's probably trying to get you to imagine the graceful movement of the trees and the leaves when the breeze blows them. That's the image that the author wants you to have in your head. But trees can't really dance, so this is an example of personification. We're trying to turn something that isn't a person into a person through person-like qualities. Here's another example. The diary told its secrets. Well, a diary can't really talk, so therefore it cannot tell anything. So the diary could not have told its secrets because the diary can't talk. So this is another example of personification. The part in red here, told its secrets. Sorry, my cursor went away. Told its secrets here is an example of personification of the diary because the diary is not human, so it cannot talk. But we've given it a human-like quality. And that's personification. Like, if you could also say something like, the wolves sung in the moonlight, to describe how wolves howl and talk to each other. Or you could say, the moon danced across the sky. Or you could say, let's see, what could you say? The pig cried when his babies grew up. Very silly example, but the idea is that pigs don't cry and the moon doesn't dance and so on and so forth. So that's personification. So that's the end of the segment on imagery, and we will pick this up in the next video on melody in poems. So that's it.